At this point, most people who fancy themselves retro video game enthusiasts have probably heard of or played a game by Treasure, the legendary action game developer from the 90s and 2000s. When most people think of Treasure, they're going to think of their more popular titles like Gunstar Heroes, Sin and Punishment, and of course, Ikaruga. Ikaruga is often considered, and rightfully so, one of the best shmups ever made. However, what many people don't realize is Treasure actually developed another shmup before Ikaruga that was easily twice as good. Yes, you didn't just hear me wrong. Radiant Silvergun, Treasure's first shmup released in 1998 in arcades and on the Sega Saturn, is easily twice as good as the legendary Ikaruga, and I'm here to tell you why. Radiant Silvergun was a technical and creative marvel for its time, and still today is an incredibly impressive game. Combining shmup and puzzle elements, Radiant Silvergun offers a level of gameplay unseen in any other shooter released to this day. Of course, you can always just play Radiant Silvergun as a straight-up shooter, ignoring the chaining system, secrets, and other goodies that make this a standout shooter, and even if you do so, it still stands as quite possibly one of the best shooters ever made. And would you believe this game also has a really good story too? Yeah, I know, a shmup with a story and a good one at that, who'd have thought? Radiant Silvergun takes place in a distant future where an ancient giant crystal referred to as the Stone-like is discovered along with some old robotic remains. In fact, the robotic remains aren't just anyone's, but those of this handsome devil known as Creator. Yep, despite him being a product of modern technology, his ancient million-year-old remains were somehow found with the Stone-like. Just as the game's characters are trying to figure out this crazy paradox, the crystal comes to life and literally kills all of humanity, except 3 Silvergun pilots, Buster, Reyna, and Guy, as well as their captain, Tanga. Oh, and also Creator, of course. They are able to barely dodge the apocalypse by being aboard the mothership Tetra, while the Stone-like essentially nukes the entire world. The 3 Silvergun pilots launch a valiant effort against the Stone-like and blast their way through countless ships while also unlocking the mystery of what the Stone-like is and why it decided to obliterate humanity. Overall, the story is actually pretty good for a shmup, which typically are no more than shoot ships, kill bosses, end. The fact that Treasure even bothered to make a decent story pieced together by cutscenes, voice acting, and dialogue, and a very interesting twist ending deserves massive props. Even if the characters are ridiculous and over the top, none of that distracts from the story here, and it definitely makes Radiant Silvergun a standout title in a genre crowded by generic plots or no plot at all. Cool story aside, no shmup is worth its weight in gold without excellent, precise, and engaging gameplay, which Radiant Silvergun excels at as well. You will literally never find another shooter on any console that has more variety in its gameplay, I promise you that. Most other shooters will have you selecting several ships, each with varying fire modes that you're stuck with until you hit a game over screen. Throw in a bomb attack and there you go, your typical formulaic shmup. And don't get me wrong, I love many of these shmups that follow this formula. However, the lack of dynamic gameplay, other than simply shooting what's right in front of you, can often make shmups feel very repetitive and even generic at times. However, Radiant Silvergun does not suffer from any of this one bit, and in fact has the most dynamic and varied gameplay of any shooter ever. Radiant Silvergun offers the player 6 different fire modes, which the player can access at any time in order to deal with any situation you find yourself in. These fire modes include your standard forward shot like you'd get in any other shooter, a powerful rear shot that also has a much weaker forward shot, a homing energy attack that's good for taking out enemies in hard to hit areas, a lock-on homing laser which works well for when you're surrounded on all sides, a diagonal shot that is great for hitting enemies to your sides that you're unable to hit with your forward shot, and then finally a scan laser which allows you to lock on and hit ships in various places as they appear in front of you. You will constantly be switching between these different fire modes depending on the situation you're in, which is made easy by each fire mode receiving its own dedicated button. That's right, no awkward fire mode scrolling like in the Thunder Force games, thank God. Each of these fire modes can also be leveled up over time as well. You level up fire modes by both using them often and also racking up as many points as you possibly can while playing. More on the point system soon, but the 6 fire modes belong to 3 different categories. For example, the standard forward shot and the rear shot belong to the same category, while the homing and lock-on homing attacks belong to their own category, and the other 2 fire modes mentioned above belong to the 3rd category. In other words, you can use either fire mode within a category and it will help level up that category. This then makes these shot types more powerful, essentially allowing you to cut through even the game's bosses like a hot knife through butter once you level them up high enough. Each category tops out at level 33, however by the time you get each category level in the high teens, you're already a goddamn force of nature. feature. The leveling system is used instead of the much more common power-up collecting system that most other shmups use. My only complaint about the leveling system is that you'll eventually reach the point where your fire modes are so OP'd that they actually diminish Radiant Silvergun's difficulty significantly. Combine this with the fact that Radiant Silvergun rewards you with an extra continue for every hour you sink into the game, and you'll be well on your way to beating the game regardless of how bad you are. Despite all this, having to manage these fire modes, deciding which mode is best for a certain section or boss, and switching between them constantly never grows old, and you'll be having just as much fun at level 3 as you will at level 30. At this point, I've been talking quite a bit about Radiant Silvergun's many fire modes and how they work. However, I still haven't discussed every weapon yet. In fact, the 7th weapon at your disposal is by far the game's most awesome and iconic weapon by far. Of course, I'm referring to the ship's massive sword. Yep, you can use the sword at any time during the game. However, slashing these pink bullets will fill this gauge that will then allow you to unleash the full potential of this devastating massive attack on every single enemy on the screen. The sword is essentially Radiant Silvergun's answer to the typical shmup bomb that most other shooters possess. This sword is freaking amazing and can be used strategically both for racking up points and for getting through certain areas more easily. Most of the time though, the spectacle of using this sword is one of the coolest things about this game, and at least for me, goes down as one of the coolest weapons in any shooter ever. As I mentioned earlier, Radiant Silvergun operates on a point system like pretty much every other shmup. At its most basic level, you'll gain points for every enemy or object you destroy in the game. However, the story doesn't end there. For anyone who's played Ikaruga, you are probably familiar with its chaining system, which essentially creates a multiplier for killing 3 enemies of the same color in a row. This system has its root in Radiant Silvergun, but instead of just black and white enemies like in Ikaruga, you're given 3 color types: blue, yellow, and red. By killing 3 enemies in a row of the same color and continuing to successfully do so, you will increase your score multiplier, resulting in each set of 3 same colored enemies being worth exponentially more points than the last 3 you just killed. Of course, up and accidentally killing an enemy of a different color before you've completed the 3-color chain will break the chain, therefore resetting the multiplier. If you're playing this game for high scores, mastering the chaining system will be absolutely required, and especially in some of the game's later sections, chaining 3 same-colored enemies in a row one after the other can be very, very challenging. Finally, the other place you'll be squeezing all the points you can out of this game are its amazing and very plentiful bosses. Like many other treasure games of the 1990s, Radiant Silvergun is filled to the brim with boss battles. Most video games, including the overwhelming majority of shmups, have you play through a stage, get to the end, and fight a boss, rinse and repeat. In Radiant Silvergun, you shoot down a couple dozen ships, fight some enormous mech with a giant cannon and arms that shoot out laser beams, kick its ass, fight another dozen or so standard enemies in a cool puzzle area, get to the next unique behemoth boss, send him back to school, deal with a few more pissant ships, and then finally battle a giant mecha shark. I mean, what the f***? This game is just goddamn, I'm gonna start crying. Radiant Silvergun has so many bosses, and they keep the pacing of this game fresh and interesting throughout. Oh, did I mention Radiant Silvergun is also one of the longest shmups you'll ever play? And yes, that includes shmups that artificially increase the length of the game by looping the gameplay. I'm looking at you, Batsugun. You won't find any stupid looping in Radiant Silvergun. The game will literally take you over an hour to beat, which pretty much makes this game the War and Peace of shooters. But anyhow, back to the bosses. Beyond how cool and epic each boss in Radiant Silvergun is, each boss also consists of various parts and components you can destroy. While you could just go straight for the jugular and take down each boss without dismantling each of its parts piece by piece, actually taking the time to do this will help increase your score dramatically and also result in some cool physical damage to the bosses. This attention to detail, both visually and in regards to scoring, just further adds to why the frequent boss encounters will have you giddy as a schoolgirl as you anticipate the next one. Speaking of visuals, there are a few other shmups that show off the level of detail, creativity, and variety present in Radiant Silvergun. Radiant Silvergun was developed on the Sega STV arcade platform, which also is home to many other great mid-90s games like Die Hard Arcade and Virtua Fighter Kids. The STV platform, which was based off the Sega Saturn's architecture, made it very easy for STV games to end up on that home console. And look, I get it, this is early mid-90s 3D we're talking about here. These aren't aren't the prettiest games, nor have they aged the best. However, Radiant Silvergun's mixture of 2D and 3D certainly helped this game age more gracefully than many of its STV counterparts. Your ship, as well as many of the other standard enemy ships in the game, are rendered as highly detailed 2D sprites, which all look amazing. The 3D elements of Radiant Silvergun are reserved mostly for the game's bosses, as well as certain stage elements and various things shown in the cutscenes. In other words, the old 3D models are not overused, and when they are used, they still retain a level of detail and creativity matched by very few other STV or Saturn titles. It's fairly well known at this point that the Saturn wasn't the greatest when it came to 3D polygons. However, I still have to give Treasure props for making bosses and other 3D parts of Radiant Silvergun look as good as they did despite all this. The only thing I haven't talked about yet is Radiant Silvergun's amazing soundtrack and overall sound quality. Most shooters out there possess some sort of techno or rock soundtrack, which is absolutely appropriate given the sci-fi themes, action, and fast pace of most games in the genre. Not Radiant Silvergun though. Nope, Radiant Silvergun uses orchestral music instead, which not only helps it stand out from the pack, but somehow just works so well with its epic visuals, gameplay, and story. I seriously cannot think of a more fitting musical style for this game, and for it to be anything different would have robbed this game of its specialness. You won't hear generic bleeps, bloops, and stock explosion noises here. Rather, some giant enemy cannon will sound different than a laser attack from one of the bosses, or from another boss's napalm attack. This auditory diversity is everywhere in Radiant Silvergun and goes well beyond the enemy weapon noises. The warning noises before each boss encounter will get you both excited and ramp up your anxiety as to what's to come next. The voice acting will both make you laugh and wonder what the hell is about to happen next, and certain bosses will roar like wild beasts despite them being made of metal and mechanical parts. The end result is every noise contributing heavily to the scale and splendor of this game, fitting in perfectly with the larger-than-life visuals and story. With no hyperbole at all, Radiant Silvergun is the best shmup ever made, and honestly one of the best video games ever made. There are many other excellent shmups and even more excellent video games out there, but there are so few that possess the amount of detail, entertainment, and love that went into Radiant Silvergun. While playing through Radiant Silvergun, it's literally impossible not to have a smile from ear to ear while tearing through bosses and blasting everything away to one of the best soundtracks ever put in a video game. This is the point in the review where I tell you to quit being a little bitch and go drop $200 to $300 on a copy of this game. Sell a kidney, whore yourself out to creepy old men, sell your soul to the devil, pick your poison. But luckily, I don't have to this time. In 2011, Radiant Silvergun HD was released exclusively on Xbox Live Arcade, allowing most Westerners to fall in love with this game for the first time. While I have a huge soft spot for the Saturn version of this game, the Xbox Live Arcade version is absolutely the route to go to play this game. You're not only given updated, polished visuals, but also subtitles so you can actually know what the hell is going on in this game. But most of all though, you can play this masterpiece for just $15 instead of its outrageous price on the Sega Saturn. And yeah, the fact that this is a digital-only release hurts me as well, but look, expecting people to fork over hundreds of dollars for any video game is just ridiculous and not even remotely an option for most people. So unless you're a crazy collector with $300 burning a hole in your pocket, just save yourself the grief and financial burden and just get the HD version on Xbox Live Arcade. But whether you heed my advice and go with the much more accessible Xbox Live Arcade version, or say go f yourself Wiggles and splurge on the Saturn version, just make sure you play this shmup in your lifetime. I literally cannot recommend a shmup more highly than Radiant Silvergun. And there you have it folks, Radiant Silvergun. And also I wanted to say to all my viewers and subscribers out there, you all rock. I just want to say how much I appreciate you watching and commenting on these videos I make, and it really keeps me inspired to continue making more and more of them. I started this channel as not only a way to fulfill a long-time goal of mine, but also to give people a way of forgetting the craziness in our world right now. I hope you continue to enjoy them, and I will continue to enjoy making them for you as well. But anyhow, thank you all for watching again, and as always, take care of yourselves.